All right, so you're told you need a root canal. And probably the first thing you're thinking is,
Yeah.
how many times am I going to have to go to the dentist for this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, 1 visit, 2 visits.
Yeah. How long is this going to take?
Yeah.
Get it over with.
It's like, get me out of here.
Right.
But it turns out that, like a lot of things in healthcare, when we dig a little deeper,
Oh, yeah.
we find that there's actually some interesting complexities behind this
Totally.
seemingly simple question of 1 versus 2.
Right.
So that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
It's this whole question of patient preference when it comes to 1 visit versus 2 visit root canals.
Yeah. Root canal therapy, RCT.
RCT.
That's right.
And to guide us through this, we have a really cool study that was done back in 2012.
Okay.
And it was published in the Journal of Endodontics by Vela and colleagues.
I love that journal.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And so what they did in this study is they basically took a bunch of patients who were scheduled for their initial root canal appointments
Okay.
at the University of Iowa.
Okay.
And they said, hey,
Yeah.
we're curious.
Uh-huh.
When you think about root canals, how many visits would you prefer?
Oh, interesting.
And here's the really interesting part.
Okay.
They wanted to know how that preference would change based on the hypothetical success rates
Yeah.
of those 2 different approaches.
So, like, if one had a better success rate, how would that affect their decision?
So they had a pretty decent sample size.
Yeah.
I think they approached about 351 patients,
Wow.
and they got 124 to respond.
Okay. So not everybody, but
Not everyone,
still a decent chunk.
but enough to give us a decent snapshot
Yeah.
of what patients might be thinking.
For sure.
Now, why is this relevant to you?
Well-
Whether you've had a root canal or you might need one in the future, or you just want to understand how healthcare decisions are made.
Or just like how these things work behind the scenes.
I mean, this is kind of a glimpse behind the curtain.
Yeah. I think a lot of times as patients, we go to the dentist
Totally.
or the doctor and we just sort of trust them to know what to do.
Absolutely.
And we don't really think about all the factors that go into their decision making.
And also our own decision making.
Right. Exactly.
Because we have a role in this.
Yeah, totally.
It's a partnership,
Uh-huh.
right?
For sure.
So this is about being informed, being empowered to understand what those trade-offs might be.
Yeah. And what options are out there
Exactly.
and to think critically about them.
And to realize that even in something as seemingly simple as
Yeah.
a root canal,
1 versus 2.
that there are actually some really interesting nuances that we need to consider.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is to really unpack the key findings of this study
Yeah, let's do it.
and to figure out what matters most to patients when it comes to the length of these root canal treatments.
Awesome.
So the researchers started by asking patients a very straightforward question. Imagine the success rates of a 1-visit root canal and a 2-visit root canal were the same.
Okay. So hypothetically, they have the same outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which one would you prefer?
Okay.
So we're taking success rate off the table.
Right.
It's just purely about preference.
Got it.
What did they find?
So the first thing they found is that a huge majority, almost 80% of people,
Wow.
said, hey, I just want to get it over with.
Yeah, one and done.
One and done.
Right.
Yeah. Less time commitment,
Fewer appointments.
fewer appointments.
Less disruption to my life.
Makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the intuitive finding.
Uh-huh.
But here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
Only 7% said they would actually prefer 2 visits,
Even if the success rate was the same.
even if the success rate was the same.
Interesting.
And then there was this other chunk of people,
Okay.
about 16%, who basically said, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it up to my dentist.
Okay. So whatever you think, Doc.
Yeah, they're the expert.
Got
Don't trust their judgment.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
So already we're seeing that.
Yeah.
There's some different factors at play here.
Totally.
But that strong preference for 1 visit when success is equal,
Right.
that's kind of the baseline
Okay.
that sets the stage for what they did next.
Got it.
So the next thing they did is they started to manipulate that hypothetical success rate.
Okay. So now they're saying, what if one's better than the other?
Exactly.
Interesting.
And they wanted to see how that would affect patient preference.
Okay. Makes sense.
So they said, all right, what if the 2-visit root canal
Uh-huh.
had a higher chance of success
Okay.
than the 1-visit root canal?
Got it.
And they started by saying, okay, what if it's only 5% better?
Just a little edge.
Just a slight edge.
Okay.
And what they found is that that preference for the 2-visit option, it jumped from 7% all the way up to 34%.
Wow. So just a little bit of a difference in success rate
Little nudge.
really changed people's minds.
Yeah, that's pretty significant, right?
Yeah, that is a huge jump.
So even a small perceived advantage in success was enough to get people to start thinking twice about that convenience factor.
Okay, so it's not all about getting it over with.
Right.
People are starting to think about the long-term outcome here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So then they said, okay, well, what if it's not just 5%?
Yeah.
What if it's 10% better?
Okay.
And that preference for 2 visits went up to 46%.
Wow. So even more.
Almost half.
Yeah.
Right.
That's significant.
And then they did it even further.
Okay.
And they said, okay, what if the 2-visit root canal is 20% more likely to be successful?
Big difference.
Big difference.
Okay.
And at that point, the majority of people, 65%,
Wow.
said, I'll take the 2 visits.
No, now most people are opting for the longer treatment
Exactly.
if it means a better chance of success.
Right. And as that perceived benefit of the 2-visit option kept increasing,
Yeah.
the preference for the 1 visit, it naturally went down.
Okay, so there is a clear trade-off happening here between convenience and effectiveness.
Right. So it seems like there's this tipping point
Yeah.
where that perceived benefit of increased success outweighs the desire for
Yeah.
just getting it over with quickly.
Totally. And that tipping point seems to be around that 10% mark.
10%.
Yeah.
That's the magic number.
Where it really starts to shift.
Right. At that point, more people would rather have 2 visits
Okay.
if it means a better chance of success.
Interesting.
So this is a really key insight because it tells us that
Yeah.
while convenience is definitely a factor,
For sure.
it's not the only thing.
Right.
And maybe it's not even the main thing,
Especially if there's a big difference in success rates.
especially if we're talking about a significant potential benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
But now, it wasn't everybody who switched their preference.
Okay.
There were still some people who stuck to their guns,
Interesting.
no matter what.
Okay, so even with a 20% difference, some people still wanted the 1 visit.
Exactly. And on the flip side, there were some people who always wanted 2 visits,
Oh, interesting.
regardless of what the success rates were.
Okay, so what was going on with those folks?
So about 5% of the people in the study consistently said, I want 2 visits,
Okay,
no matter what.
no matter what.
And then about 20% consistently said, I'm going to do whatever my dentist recommends.
Oh, so they're just going with the expert opinion.
Totally.
Okay.
So what's going on with these groups?
That's a great question.
Right. Clearly something else is driving their decision making.
Right, it's not just about the success rates or the number of visits.
Absolutely.
There must be other factors at play.
So what did the researchers say about these folks?
So they acknowledged that there's probably a whole bunch of reasons why somebody might consistently prefer 2 visits.
Okay.
For example,
Yeah.
some people have problems with their jaw.
Oh, yeah, like TMJ.
TMJ, exactly.
Okay.
And it might be really hard for them to keep their mouth open
Oh, yeah.
for a long time.
For a 2-hour procedure.
Right.
That makes sense.
So for them, 2 shorter appointments might be a lot more comfortable.
Way more comfortable.
Yeah.
So it's a physical comfort thing.
Totally.
Okay. That makes sense. What else?
Other people might have scheduling issues,
Oh, yeah.
right? They might not be able to take a big chunk of time off work.
For that one long appointment.
Right. But they could maybe squeeze in 2 shorter appointments.
2 shorter ones, yeah.
So it's really about fitting it into their lives.
Their schedules.
Exactly.
Okay. And then there's always the logistical stuff.
Yeah, like transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's hard to get to the dentist, then maybe 2 shorter trips is easier than 1.
Right, especially if they have to rely on public transportation or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that people have all sorts of different reasons
Totally.
for making these decisions. Right. It's not one size fits all.
And that's important to remember.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what about those folks who just said, I'm going to trust my dentist? Yeah.
What's up with them?
What's going on there?
I think for them, it really boils down to trust.
Trust.
Yeah, they trust their dentist.
So you believe in their dentist's expertise.
Exactly. They figure the dentist has seen this a million times.
Right.
And they know what they're doing.
They know my specific situation.
Right.
They have all the information. And they trust them to make the best call.
Yeah, and some people might just feel overwhelmed by all the medical stuff.
Right.
And they're like, you know what? You're the expert. Just tell me what to do.
Just tell me what to do.
Yeah, I don't want to have to make this decision.
I don't want to have to think about it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're seeing this really interesting interplay between patient preference, dentist expertise,
Yeah.
and also all these other personal factors.
It's a complicated.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the researchers are trying to highlight.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did they say about the importance of communication.
Yeah, because that seems like a really key takeaway here, is that we need to be talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
So the study concluded that dentists should really be discussing success rates with their patients.
Yes.
When they're planning root canal treatment,
Yes.
it's not just about saying, okay, here are your options, 1 visit or 2 visits.
Yeah.
It's about saying, okay, if we do 1 visit, here's what the success rate looks like. If we do 2 visits, here's what the success rate looks like.
Exactly.
And then having a conversation about what that means for the patient.
Right, because it's not enough just to present the options.
Yeah.
We need to give people the information they need to make an informed decision.
Right, and to understand the potential outcomes.
I feel it.
And to feel confident in their choice.
And that's about empowering you, the listener.
Yeah.
Right? This is about you being an active participant in your own healthcare.
Not just a passive recipient of care.
Right. It's not just following orders.
Yeah.
It's about understanding what's going on.
Right, asking questions.
Having those conversations.
Making informed decisions.
And feeling good about the choices that you're making.
Absolutely.
And the study actually said that this idea of patient values is crucial.
Yeah.
It's a critical part of decision making.
Regardless of the specific dental issue.
Exactly.
It's not just about the teeth.
It's about the person.
Yeah, it's about the whole patient.
All right.
Their needs, their preferences, their values.
And I think that's a really important message to take away from this.
For sure.
Now, like any good study,
Yeah.
they acknowledge that there were some limitations.
Oh, see, good. They're being honest.
Right. Got to keep it real.
Yeah.
Got to have that balanced perspective.
Transparency is key.
So what were some of the limitations they pointed out?
So the first one was that they didn't get a response from everybody.
Right. Only about 1/3 of the people they approached actually completed the survey.
Yeah. So they got 124 responses out of 351 people.
So their findings might not perfectly reflect every single patient out there.
Right. It's a good sample size.
Yeah.
But it's not the whole population.
Not the whole population.
So we got to keep that in mind.
Okay, what else?
Another limitation was the way they presented the treatment times.
Okay, so they were talking about like a 2-hour appointment versus 2 1-hour appointments.
Right. But in reality, it's not always that simple.
Right.
There's other stuff that happens during those appointments,
Very quick.
like giving you anesthesia,
Oh, yeah.
numbing you up.
Right.
And then if it's a 2-visit procedure,
Uh-huh.
you got to put some medication in there.
Between appointments.
Yeah. And then take it out at the next appointment.
And then there's the time it takes for the numbing to wear off.
Right, exactly.
And all that stuff.
So the actual time you spend at the dentist might be a bit longer.
Than what they presented in the study.
Yeah. So the 1-visit option might not be quite as quick and easy as it seems.
It's not just about the procedure itself.
Right. There's all this other stuff that goes along with it.
Okay, so good point. What else did they say?
Another thing they pointed out was that they only used hypothetical success rates.
Okay.
In the real world, success can depend on a bunch of different things.
Like what?
Like which tooth it is.
Oh, okay.
And how bad the damage is.
Really?
And the quality of the restoration that they put in.
The filling or the crown?
Exactly.
Okay.
And even just your own body's ability to heal.
Your individual healing ability.
Right.
Okay.
So those things weren't factored into the study.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a simplification.
For sure.
But it's still giving us some valuable insights.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the last limitation they talked about was really interesting.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
It had to do with the way they framed the scenarios.
Okay.
So they always talked about success rates, right? Like this one has a 90% success rate.
Yeah.
This one has an 80% success rate.
Right.
And they wondered if people might have responded differently
Okay.
if they had talked about failure rates instead.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of saying 90% success, 80% success,
Yeah.
they could have said 10% failure, 20% failure.
Exactly. And psychologically, that might feel different,
Oh, totally.
even though it's the same numbers.
Right. Like, I'd much rather hear about a 90% success rate
Yeah.
than a 10% failure rate,
It sounds more positive.
even though they mean the same thing.
Right. So it's all about how you frame it.
Exactly.
And that can influence people's decisions.
For sure.
So really fascinating stuff.
It is.
So now let's zoom out a little bit
Okay.
and think about this study in the context of all the other research that's been done.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of debate about 1 visit versus 2 visit.
Oh, yeah, for root canals.
A good time.
So what did the researchers say about that?
They actually pointed out that a lot of the existing research suggests that there's no huge difference in healing outcomes
Okay.
between 1 visit and 2 visits.
So whether you get it done in one go or two
Yeah.
doesn't really seem to matter that much,
Especially for certain types of root canals.
right? Like if you have an infected tooth or inflammation around the root,
Right.
it doesn't seem to make a big difference.
So in those cases, it really comes down to patient preference.
And that's what this study was all about.
Totally.
It wasn't about saying one visit is better or 2 visits is better. It was about understanding what patients want.
Right, and how their preferences change based on different factors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they specifically wanted to see if that potential for a higher success rate would outweigh the desire for convenience.
Interesting.
They found that for a lot of people, it does.
It does.
So they're basically saying, hey, we need more research on this.
Yeah.
We need to figure out what else is influencing patient preferences.
Right, because there's clearly more to it than just success rates and convenience.
Absolutely.
So more research is definitely needed.
All right, so let's bring it all home.
Okay.
For you, the listener,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway from all of this?
The key takeaway is that while a lot of people love the convenience of a one-visit root canal,
One and done.
one and done,
Yeah.
a lot of people are also willing to go for the 2-visit option
Okay.
if they think it's going to give them a better chance of success.
Right.
And that's really important to remember.
It challenges that assumption that everybody just wants to get it over with as quickly as possible.
Totally.
Some people are willing to put in the extra time and effort
Yeah,
if they think it's going to lead to a better outcome.
absolutely.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Chew on.
Yeah.
Oh.
Since we've seen that success rates can be such a big factor in these healthcare decisions,
Yeah.
how often are you actually talking to your healthcare providers
Right.
about these probabilities?
About the chances of success.
Right. What are the chances that this is going to work?
Yeah. Are you asking that question?
Are you asking that question?
Because you should be.
And what other questions could you be asking? To feel more informed, more confident in the choices that you're making.
Right.
And this isn't just about dental care.
No, this is about all your healthcare decisions.
Right. Anytime you're faced with a choice, think about that balance between convenience
Yeah.
and effectiveness.
How important is each one to you?
Exactly. And have those conversations with your providers.
Totally.
It's worth it.
Absolutely.
It really is.
It's your health.
It's your health.
Yeah.
All right. That's it for today's Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.